So here's another if-only question. If only I could do this method by myself without having someone else to hold it. So if I'm going to do the toggle drill, okay, and I need to do it on some kind of surface, say for example, I need someone else to hold it if I can't pin it. But what if I'm by myself and I can't pin it? For example, the frozen tundra, the ground, I can't put anything in the ground, right? So how am I going to be able to keep it still? Well, I'm going to have to find a way to keep it still myself. But how am I able to do that if I can't kneel on it or sit on it or stand on it? It needs to be up real close like this in order for me to be able to turn it. How do I do a mouth toggle drill and be able to hold down the base by myself? Okay, if only I could figure that out. Then the whole tribe will live, right? Again, this is a mother necessity question. How do I do that? Well, our ancestors came up with the bow, okay? And here I have a few examples, and guess what? They're made of my favorite. This one's thick-walled bamboo, okay? This one's about, let's say about 2 feet, maybe a little more. This one is also, actually this one is rattan, okay? So you can see how flexible it is. And this one is just over 1.5 feet, okay? And they have nylon cord attached to them, by the way. This one is also rattan. Very, very flexible. And what's very good about flex, which I'll talk about later with the bow drill, is if your string is natural material, like one that you've twisted together yourself, like I showed you earlier, with all those natural fibers, you don't want too much tension on the string. Well, the bow gives enough flex to be able to apply some tension, but not enough to break the cord, okay? So we're going to put our rattan ones away, since actually, you know what, let's do the rattan one. I'll even put my bamboo one aside, okay? Now our base today is basswood, which I ordered from a hardwood specialty outlet from somewhere. So I ordered it online. So any wood you want to experiment with in today's day and age, you just have to go on your computer, look it up, and you're going to be able to buy it from somewhere, and they're going to get it for you. And it'll be there in about a week. So I ordered some basswood, and this is a section of it. So how can I be able to perform this method by myself, hold down the base, and turn the spindle? Obviously all my hands are going to be occupied. How do I do that? Well, how do I spin a spindle with one hand? If only I could spin the spindle with one hand, then the whole tribe would be saved. Well, here's what our answers came up with. The bow, okay? So we're going to use our oak pressure mouth brace. Again, we're going to use our little drumstick, and we're going to, now I'm going to talk about this in detail later with the bow drill, but the tension has to be just right where when you apply the spindle, it's really tight, okay? And the bow has enough flex to take up that tension, okay? So what I'm going to do is get this all set up and get in position, my non-equilateral triangle there. And we're going to warm it up and we're going to get this thing going. Another thing is that same principle I said before. We don't want to try to drift into the notch, okay? So I'm not going to be pushing the bow this way and back, which is toward the notch. I'm actually going to be bowing across, okay? Which is not toward the notch at any point, given point in time, okay? almost destroyed my call. But that was good for you to see. Don't make that same mistake. Okay, so we got us 2 coals, maybe 3, if I separate them. I have 3 coals. Okay. So our ancestors weren't stupid, okay? I mean, when it came down to the wire, some of them came up with ingenious things. So, mother necessity, where would we be? So, all right. Right here. Okay, start off easy. Nope, got slack. Don't slack. Okay, go. Nope, you got slack. You're not supposed to slack. Okay. No slack. You're giving slack. Keep this tight. Pull. Nope, you're slacking. Okay. No, okay. You have slack in the line. Hold that. Okay. Keep it tight, both ends. Okay, go. Nope, you have slack in the line. It's spinning. Okay, go. Nope, you're slacking the line. Keep tension on it. You have to keep pulling on both ends, okay? No, you're letting one side go. Okay, you can't do that. Okay, go. You're not keeping it tight. Nope, you're letting it. Okay, go. That's it. Okay, faster. Keep tension on it. Keep pulling on it. Pull. Faster, faster. Nope, you're slacking. Okay. Alright, very good. Very good. We'll keep practicing that. Now, if you'll remember, back when I first explained and started talking about cordage and fibers and getting them and making them, there are 2 main principles. There's 2 main variables that's involved with cordage. And they are tensile strength and flexibility, if you'll remember. Tensile strength is cordage having the ability to being able to be pulled and not break. Okay? Flexibility means that it can wrap around also and not break as well. So when you're doing mouth toggle drill and mouth bow drill, the cord has to have both of those factors, both of those principles and those variables definitely need to be in place. Okay, so that needs to be the quality of your cordage, of your fiber that you're working with, for one thing. Now the other thing too is, in order to make the technique work, to balance out the variable, to make this work with this cordage, with this one more device being the cordage, you cannot have slack on one end when one end is pulling. So here I have Jake, and he's going to pull a little bit on this cordage to make this spin. Okay? Go ahead, Jay. Okay, slowly, slowly. Now, what happens here is that he pulls one, but the other, there's no slack. So he doesn't help this other one along by pushing. See what happens? There's a, nope, there's a slack. There can't be a slack. The tension has to always be maintained. Okay? So when he does this, okay, there's always a tension. So even though this one over here, when one pulls, the other gives, where it's giving, there's still tension on the line. Understand what I'm saying? Because if you pull and you have slack, go ahead, pull. Okay, it's going to slip. Okay, so you have to maintain tension on the line at all times. Okay, from both ends, regardless of what end is doing what. Okay, very good, Jay. Now the bow, and we'll get into this again in detail with the bow drill. Now here, tensile strength, see it doesn't break, and flexibility are important. Okay, but with the principle of the bow, okay, tension is maintained on both ends at all times. Okay, so there's never a slack, which is why the tension on the bow always has to be perfect. Okay, now you could see that there's excellent tensile strength and flexibility in this cord, those two main principles, those two factors, okay, of those variables. But tension is also maintained, okay, whether you're doing it with the toggle or you're doing it with a bow, okay? So these need to be kept in mind when you're doing these techniques. All right. Thanks, Jake. All right. So this will be our last form that we'll do before we go into the epimethei and into our next section, which is the bow drill, finally. And so, as your sensei, I want you to really follow along because all of this is very important. It seems like a review, but it brings everything together. Now, I've spent a lot of time trying for us to kind of be on the same level with the same language here, especially regarding these 22 variables, all right? Because this is the whole science of this whole thing, of how everything works. Now, what's important to know about these variables is that they have, some of them, a dual nature. They have kind of two parts. So a lot of some of them are mainly just structural, okay, but some of them are also structural as well as balanced by technique, okay, which I'm going to explain next. All right. So, and what I mean also is that along with the upgrade complications that you run into when you add one more device, say, like your pressure mouth brace, all right, something changes, and then some of the other variables need to change too, okay, because you got to keep everything within that Goldilocks mean, okay, everything's got to stay within balance, or natural law theory is gonna, okay, penalty. We want a reward. So what should happen if you have an upgrade complication, okay, or if you have an upgrade, you're going to have upgrade complications. Some of these variables you're going to need to adjust, but the rest of them should all improve on some level, okay? Now, we're going to go over that so that you can understand that thoroughly, because we want clarity, not just simplicity, okay? Health should improve, because obviously with this piece, right, in going through our pad pi, our main problem was if only question, if only we could save our hands, right? That was really the main issue, which is a huge health issue. And so our health issue definitely improved. It definitely saved our hands. Our energy variable definitely improved. I could do mount drill after mount drill after mount drill, no problem. And it's you could definitely do more mount drills with more energy, okay, than you do with the hand drill, which drains your energy faster. Okay. Now, need. The need here is to evolve and adapt, okay? Because if you don't, the penalty of natural law theory is going to kick into effect, and there'll be suffering or death, okay? If you don't get this fire going, for example, for yourself and the tribe. So the need is to adapt and evolve. You need to balance out all of these variables, okay? They have to be within the Goldilocks mean. Skill. Now, you're relying on your hand drill experience, okay? And the more techniques you do, the more methods you do, the more practice you do, the more training you do, your awareness increases, okay? And it starts to go from after to during to before, okay? Now, a really good example of that I have to give you is, because I'm a nurse, an ER nurse, we, with all the children that I get in the ER, especially the little ones, infants to toddlers, okay, I would a lot of times have to do an IV on them. In fact, more times than not, I have to do an IV on them. And if you can imagine, that's like trying to thread a needle with a needle to get an IV catheter into an infant's vein. So, after a lot of failures, okay, of not getting it on the first try, and it's a very serious issue, because, you know, the parents are watching you. Nursing is one of the most trusted professions, probably the most trusted profession that they say, and everyone looks to you as to be the person to balance everything out, okay? Now, starting an IV is, you know, nurses nowadays wouldn't think anything of it. It's just matter of fact. But it's pretty much a big deal, especially when it comes to your little kid. And so what I've learned to do is to get everything ready, okay? I will set everything up. I will have everything laid out in the order that I need it to start an IV. I have everything that I might need right there too, as a backup, okay? I have already acquired the help I need. Usually I get a technician who's working with me to hold an arm, and after that, I really just kind of have to show up, like I said before. Everything is ready. I have my light that I help to see the vein with, and I'll ask the parents if they want to stay or go. It's up to them. But either way, I block everything out, and it's just me and the vein. So, but we're learning friction firekeeping. So here it's just me and Nicole, or me and the devices, or the fire equipment, right? So, and again, I don't always get it on the first try, but with serious things like that, you have to kind of keep that perspective, where you've planned everything to the point where you just can't plan anymore. And then finally it just comes to the point of having to implement in your pad pi process. Okay. Now, I always say the first IV is the fastest IV. So if a kid is really sick and needs to be stabilized right away, no matter how long it takes to get ready to get that IV the first time and minimize suffering, That's the fastest IV. So it's not just a matter of grabbing a needle with a catheter and trying to shove it into a kid's arm and trying to find a vein. That doesn't do anybody any good. The kid suffers, the parent suffers, you suffer because that's a complete lack of skill. And it's a complete lack of compassion as well. So the more planning you do, the more preparation you do to get ready, the fastest you're going to get a call. And by fastest, I mean if you only have one shot at this. Because a lot of times the parents will say, you get one shot at sticking my kid. Well, that's a lot of pressure. Well, imagine that with trying to get a fire for your whole tribe, and they're going to die. So it's kind of along the same thing. That kind of pressure. So do all the planning you can. Plus, you have to consider your energy, how much energy you're going to have, how much wood do you actually have on your base. Do you really only get one shot at this? So you have to approach everything with that kind of awareness. All right, reason. Now, reason is what balances everything into the Goldilocks mean. It's reason that is a variable itself that balances all the other variables. It's that human factor that does that. And that is a complication. That's one of the upgrade complications. Okay? So, need is kind of a complication. Skill is kind of a complication that needs to be balanced. Reason is a complication that needs to be balanced, because now you got to come up with a technique. You got to figure out how you're going to balance those things out. Okay? Means and resources. Well, this is the upgrade, right? The pressure mount brace. But there's also complications with that. You have peripherals you need to deal with. There's oil or some kind of lubricant, and things like that. You may have, if you have a reload, you may need bindings for that. Okay? And what we're going to do is the mouth bow drill. So, along with means, we're going to add not just one more device, which was the cord for the mouth toggle drill, but a bow. Okay? And again, we're going to go into the bow at length with the bow drill. So now we have 2 more devices added. Okay? So our need for reason to be able to balance things out is very important. Okay? So let's back up a second. So what I mean by need, okay, here's the need in this instance. What you see before you here is tinder fungus, which I showed you earlier for co-extender, right? Well, before I just showed you the polypore shell fungus for a base. Well, this little piece here is tinder fungus, and this is going to be our base. This little tiny thing, okay? Now, the need here and the reason is, the need is we got one shot at this, okay? The reasoning is that I have to come up with a technique to be able to hold this down because I can't pin it to the ground. Okay, it's too small. So I have to hold this with my hand. So how would I hold it with my hand? Well, that's where the bow comes in. Okay? Because with the toggle drill, I need both hands. But with the bow drill, I only need one hand. Okay? So there's our need. We get one shot. We have to adapt and evolve, or the natural law says you're going to die. Okay? So I'm relying on my skill of everything I've known up till now to be able to make this work. I have to use my reason to balance everything out with a technique and come up with a form that's going to save the whole tribe. Okay? The means are 2 more devices on top of the pressure mouth brace, we have cordage, and we have a bow, and we have oil as a peripheral. All right. Now for means, our spindle in this case is going to be the 12-inch copper with the oak brace end with the yucca base end. Okay. A chemical, there should be no issue chemical-wise here. Moisture, the conditions are dry. Okay, so if we had chemical and moisture issues, they should improve based on the technique we're going to do. Because with the bow, we should get more rotations. We should get more speed, which should increase our ability to pull this off. So more rotations, more speed, more pressure would mean that we should be able to bust through some chemical issue, but especially some moisture issue. We would be able to dry it out faster if moisture was a bit of an issue. Density. The yucca is a fairly low dense wood, but if we had a harder type of wood, it would make it easier, okay, to do. The tinder fungus, by the way, is also very low density in this case. But if they were both of a higher density, that variable would improve. Again, we're going over what is a complication that needs to be balanced and what variable actually improves. So chemical would improve, moisture would improve, density would improve, and fuel should also improve. We should be able to not only make more fuel, but should be able to ignite it fairly well. Okay, so that variable should also improve. The containment or the notch. Now again, the position needs to be forward to eyeball it as we look down with our pressure mouth brace. Okay, so that position has changed, but the notch also needs to be off a different angle than the way that I'm bowing. Okay, so I can't have the force of the bow going toward the notch. Okay, if the notch is this way, I can't be pushing the spindle toward the notch. So when I bow, the notch and the bow have to be at perpendicular angles. It has to be across, like a T. Okay? To keep that in mind. Again, reason is balancing out this whole technique, this whole method. All right? Air, there should be no issue there. In fact, everything should improve in some sense. All right? Hopefully I got a good notch. Pressure. Now we've come to learn a new technique, and it's actually a martial arts technique where you're actually using your body weight back and forth on your legs or lower area, and it's called sliding. So this term is called, we're going to call it sliding, okay, where you put your body weight forward or back, okay. So we've learned that method, and also the pressure is going to improve because we're able to use our body weight and not just our hands, like with the hand drill. Okay. Temperature should improve because we're going to have more pressure and we're going to have more speed, okay, with the bow. So that variable should improve. Back and forth. Now this is a very key variable that needs to be balanced out right here, so pay attention. With the mouth toggle drill, okay, the forces now are pull, pull, okay. Now the mouth drill, if it's plain mouth drill, is simultaneous push-pull, push-pull, okay. It's one motion of push-pull, which means that there are no lateral forces. Understand? In fact, this is a bilateral force. Two forces at once. It's bilateral, okay? 1, 2, 1, 2 at the same time, okay? we're going to call that a bilateral force. But this comes as a complication. When the bow goes on the spindle, or the toggle cord goes around the spindle, there's now a unilateral force, okay? So if I go pull, pull with the cordage, I'm pulling in a lateral direction all the force in one direction at one time. And then I have to pull with force in another direction at another time, okay? Instead of everything being simultaneous. This is a very important variable that needs to be balanced, okay? Because, for example, when I push, I could push this thing into the notch if my direction is off. So when we push, we're going to push at a different angle that's not toward the notch, right? So we keep that in consideration. But our device has to be of a certain structure now, okay? It cannot be, for example, this goldenrod, which we did earlier, okay? Which we did with just a pressure mount brace, with the simultaneous bilateral forces, okay? Now, something hollow like this, that's in a way very fragile, cannot withstand a unilateral force like that in the center. This would just crack right in half, okay? For example, this piece of milkweed spindle, okay? If a force was applied with a string, for example, to one side instead of a simultaneous push-pull, if forces went to one side, it would break because it's hollow and the structure is not strong enough to be able to withstand that pressure. Okay, understand? So something hollow like this may be out of the question unless the structure is strong enough. A reload like this, okay, that's a very fragile binding, okay, would not be able to withstand, even though the pressure is here in the center, this binding here will not be able to withstand the unilateral force. This reload will just snap off, okay? Even a solid, like this cattail, but it's a very low density and very soft wood, plant stock. So if I were to take the toggle cord or the bow and put it around this spindle, it will just snap in half. It will not be able to stand the unilateral force because these can only deal with the straw principle, which we talked about earlier, which goes straight down through the walls of the spindle stock and has a simultaneous bilateral push-pull. Here we are going to be dealing with a unilateral force that goes pull-pull or push-pull. Okay? This is very important to understand. So this actually is called a, this is actually a technique in martial arts, this principle. And let me see here. Here we have a very thin reed, okay? Now let's say this is bamboo. It's in the grass family. It has nodes. In a way, it's the same thing in the same family. So it has a hollow chamber section, okay, with the nodes that cut those off. And as you know, it's very tall and very straight and very strong if it follows the straw principle. Now, in martial arts, there's a technique called take ori. And take means bamboo, and ori means break, or to fracture. So the name of it is kind of a code word. Again, we're talking about a hiden, tenki densho. It's kind of a secret. If you don't know what the technique is, you may not know it by its name, but here I'm explaining it to you. So that principle of having a force go against its strength. So if its strength is this way, okay, through the poles, it's not strong this way, between the poles. So take ori means if someone is strong one way, and by this technique, it's usually the wrist. If someone grabs you like this, if you can kind of just, not break, but bend their wrist, they're not strong anymore, okay? And that's the martial arts technique of take ori. So, but here, once you do that, you've destroyed the integrity of what makes this strong, okay? Hey guys, shh. Okay, sorry about that. Now, axis. Now your axis has to be extremely straight, okay, in this case. Now, you can get away with kind of a wobbly axis, a slight one, when you're doing the simultaneous back and forth bilateral push-pull, okay? But when you have the unilateral force, okay, going in one direction, a crooked spindle is not going to cut it. And here's why. If your spindle is a little crooked, when the cord starts to go in one direction, okay, if the cord is wrapped around, the spindle is only going to stop in that direction like this. It can't spin because the force is pushing it in that direction, okay? So if I pull the spindle, it's going to stay like this. It's not going to spin. Understand? Your spindle has to be absolutely straight to spin on an axis. So it has to be extremely straight. Okay? If it's bent in the slightest, the string is just going to make it go to this side and it's going to stay there. Okay? Which you'll see. So in this case, that's not going to happen. We have a copper tube. So it's as straight as it's going to be. Okay. So straightness is more vital. Rotations are going to improve. So axis is a complication, but rotations are going to improve. Okay. If we got a good long stroke with our bow, or a good long pull with our mouth toggle drill, we're going to have a lot of rotations, and therefore we're going to have a lot of speed, and then we're going to have a lot more temperature and pressure. So everything should improve on that level. Okay. Duration, because we have more energy, we should be able to go longer. Okay. We should be able to go for a longer time to ensure that we have a good call. However, we only get one shot at this, so we have to get our call fairly quickly. So we have to balance between taking our time to do it right with don't burn through the base, because you only get one shot at this base. Alexa, close that door. Alright. So, speed. Speed should definitely improve because we're going to get a lot of rotation on this thing. Okay? We're going to have a lot of energy, and we got a lot of cord, so we should be able to spin this thing pretty fast. Space. Again, we're three-dimensional here. I'm going to do this on the table. I'm going to be doing this in the kneeling position as a technique to show you. Okay? But it's still three-dimensional. We're going to have our triangular base to stay stable. Now, surface area. That's an area that should also improve. Because if we have a larger diameter spindle, we're going to have more surface area. And this is a solid. It has more surface area. I'm not going to hollow it out. So we should be able to deal with that issue without a problem. So that's not a complication, that's actually an improvement. Okay. Stability. Again, I'm going to be in my triangulated position for stability, and I have to come up with a technique to stabilize the base, and that's going to be one hand. Okay, and we do that through reasoning because of our need. We need to adapt and evolve, or we're going to have a sanction consequence penalty. Okay, so we're going to do the mouth bow drill, and we're going to fire this thing up. Okay. All right. Tinder fungus, base, copper spindle with yucca reload, oak, brace end. We have our little wood cold transfer device there. Oak, T pressure mouth brace, and bamboo bow with corded string. Okay? Here we go. Alright, so I'm going to get into the seiza position. Okay? Now I have some towels here because I'm going to be sitting on this table, which is really hard, not like on the ground, which is a little softer. Okay, now how this is done is, seiza is a Japanese way of sitting, and you're basically sitting on your heels. Okay, the knees are forward, okay, and your feet are flat. Okay, you settle into that position. Now we have our, and what's good about this position too is that I can lean right over the method and apply pressure with my body weight and have a very strong base. This is a triangle, definitely. Okay, 1, 2, and where I'm sitting is 3. So I have a very stable triangle going on for stability. In fact, I'm probably going to widen my stance a little bit. Now we have our oak T pressure mount brace, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to instead use the 7-inch copper with a reload of willow, okay, with our tinder fungus base, which I'm going to hold. We're going to get rid of that dead space center a little bit. Now this is a more dense wood than yucca or anything like that. Even tree of heaven is more dense, and so again, that's one of the variables that should improve. But we're going to take down the surface area a little bit and get rid of that dead space. Our bow is going to be the very thick bamboo with a regular cord, and I'm going to go over in detail the tension and everything like that of how the spindle goes on the bow and everything like that. Okay. Now, the base of the tinder fungus is very high, so we're going to fill it with some dust for luck. Okay. And so we need to adapt and evolve, which is what's going on here, at least to try to balance this out. Now, I have to hold this with one hand, and I have to bow with the other. I'm going to throw a little bit of oil in there for luck. Get that around. Okay. And we're going to warm it up, and here we go. got our call. Okay. In fact, the coal is the base. See that? Okay. All right. Here is our base coal. And just throw this whole thing into your tinder bottle. All right? It's amazing, right? On to epimethii and the bojo. And we're in our epimethii segment, my afterthoughts section. And so just to clarify something, I like to really make sure things are clear. I don't go for the simplistic version because first of all, when I think teachers simplify things, in a way it insults your intelligence. So there's a few things that I think go on when they want to simplify things. One is you don't really want to take the time to clarify. They don't really want to take the time to give you the whole enchilada, okay? Not just meat and potatoes, but the whole 7-course meal has to go in there. Now, when it comes to life being on the line, I don't think a simplified version cuts it, okay? I think that absolute clarity is necessary. And to see and to hear as much as possible, I think is absolutely necessary. It's necessary for your training. It's necessary for lives that are under your care. This is how all of this came about, is because lives were on the line. And as a skill that is dedicated to such things in its original function and purpose, I feel as a real teacher, as your sensei, I need to continue that. That's, I think, in fact, I think it's not just an option, I think it's the option. So I will always choose clarity over simplicity any day. And a teacher that I think is just simplifying things is cutting you short, as a matter of fact. So, and I think some people, student-wise, will ask for the simplified version. And to me, that shows that they don't want clarity. They just want the quick version because they don't really truly want to understand it. So this whole densho, this whole media, is expressively for people who want to get everything they can out of it, okay? Who want to see all the little nuances, who want to see all the little details, all the way down to the fails that I make. I mean, it happens to everybody, but I think you need to see them because this is all about life being on the line. So if you are watching this to really learn this, glean as much as you can out of it and ask yourself more questions about things. How can I do this? How can I do that? I don't really understand this. Well, there's more. There's always more. So, and you're always welcome to try to contact me to answer your questions as well, if it's not on the densho. Okay? Most things I would have covered, but there's always something that kind of slips through. So, but I want you to have clarity. I don't want you to have just a simplified version. Another thing too is you have to make your devices in the sense that how you have to really trust them. Again, it's all in the preparation. Your awareness is going to start moving from afterward, where hindsight is 20/20. I should have done this. I should have done that. To during, where you can hopefully make adjustments on the fly, or you just stop what you're doing because you know you're not going to be able to finish, and because you know that structure and function is unbalanced with the variables, and your awareness eventually moves to before, where you've done everything possible you can do. You think to make this work, your carvings are just right, you think you got maybe just the right woods, your technique is on, your health, your energy, all those things should be fall in place. And like I said, you should just have to show up and pull it off. But here's a question for you to ask yourself. It's one thing for you to trust your devices when you're doing them. How would you feel if you had to lend this device to someone you cared about, or even anybody? Now, would you trust what you're giving them, what you created, to be able to start a fire for them if they needed it? So let's say, for example, you're in a tribe back in the day, and one of your tribe mates asked to borrow your fire making device, and so you lend it to him, but would it really work for him is the question. Now, as a matter of life and death, would you trust that device to give it to someone who's under your care? Would you give it to your children if they had to be able to use it? Something like to that effect. So I want your skill to come up to a point where you can really feel confident about something like that with your skill. All right. Now, the northern peoples that I had mentioned, the ones of Alaska and Canada, they had what they have now. They would use no less than 3 devices. Okay, so they have their base, they have their spindle, obviously, but you will notice that they don't do hand drill, which is 2 pieces, 2 devices. You'll also notice that these northern peoples won't do, if you really research it, they don't do fire plow, they don't do fire saw, and they don't do fire thong, which are both also 2 devices only. In the northern climates, where it's really cold temperature, there's a lot of moisture, okay? The woods may be more dense, maybe. There isn't much plant life, okay? Health and energy are an issue, because you're always cold. So what they do is they rely on combinations of 3 or more. So usually like 4 or 5 devices in there. So our next section is going to be bow drill, which is a few more devices, all right? Which means that you're going to have more reliability to be able to get a fire going, okay? So we're going to move beyond the mouth toggle drill, and beyond the mouth bow drill, we're going to get into the bow drill. And again, this is all about life and living, okay? This is all about supporting life, promoting life. And that's what the Tao of Lao is really about. It's killing those 4 adversities that we talked about earlier. It kills ignorance, poverty, conflict, and disease and trauma is what the Tao of Lao kind of represents. So it's about personal responsibility for self and others, especially others, as a person that steps up to take care of their people. And just to keep in mind. Now, as a reminder, the whole realm of friction firekeeping falls under the realm of the hunter-gatherer, okay, for whatever that society was back in the day. And if you were a parent back in the day in the nomadic tribes, you did everything. You were the scout, the information gatherer, the profiler. You were the hunter-gatherer, so you were responsible for sustainability. You were the provider. You protected your people. You were the warrior, and you were responsible for their defense and their safety. And you were also, if you could be, the healer. You were the preserver of life, and you were fully responsible for their health and took care of any kind of disease and trauma. So you were all in one if you were a parent back then. And today's day and age, in a way, you're still all in one. You're still responsible for all four of those things. But friction fire keeping, that skill, that realm falls under the hunter-gatherer, which, as you know, you need to do your information gathering and do your problem solving in order to complete that role, that duty. And how the scout goes about problem solving those issues is through our equation method, which we've been going over. So, function, variation, variables, and structure. The why, the how, and the what, and all that stuff. And we're going first right to left, and then left to right, and figuring out all the variables and trying to create structures and fulfilling function. That equation, I think, is very key, is very necessary. And what that equation does is it supports life. It supports our value, our primary universal value of life and living. Okay? And life and the life value falls under the natural law theory, which rules all. The whole universe, including the earth and everything on it and all life on it, has to follow the rules, has to follow the laws of nature, of the universe. So if you want to go backwards that way, that's kind of how you end up at natural law theory. Hunter-gatherer to the scout, to the equation, to life value theory, to natural law theory. That's how I ended up there. I worked my way backwards trying to figure this stuff out. And I just kind of hand it to you, and it's actually kind of probably hard for you to understand since maybe life is not on the line for you. But in the past, it's been on the line for me, and I'm responsible for the lives of other people. And not just my family, but as a nurse, I do it as a profession. So I like to think I know what I'm talking about with this core four of the Tao of Lao. I hope it starts to make sense after a while. So I challenge you to step up and know more, to do more, be more, okay? And let's keep going. Let's get on to the Bojo.